Well, as a pretty unexpected surprise, you guys really seemed to get into my video covering the first live-action Resident Evil movie. In the past, I'd received a bunch of requests to cover it, but I guess I underestimated just how many people really wanted these movies to show up on the channel. And to be totally honest, that video was just kind of a fun project to break up some other stuff I was working on but gotten a little fatigued with, so it put a smile on my face when so many of you gave me the go-ahead to cover the rest of the movies in the series. Although, looking back, this may have been some kind of "we'd love to watch this guy suffer" type of deal. Well, either way, I intend on doing just that, and whether it's a blessing or a curse, I'm actually not super familiar with the other titles in this series. When RE Apocalypse came out, me and a group of friends got together to see it, but sort of got kicked out of the theater before the movie even started. Through no fault of my own, of course, you guys know I'm a saint. Well, me and a buddy did manage to drive to another theater the following day, but after that first viewing, I never really watched it again. Looking back now, I don't really remember much about it, but if we're being honest, the little that does come to mind ain't exactly movie of the year material, so this will be a bit of a refresher for me and hopefully mildly entertaining for you. Well, without further delay, what's up guys? I'm Jared from Avalanche Reviews. Welcome to the Resident Evil Retrospective. Starting out with a recap of the last movie's plot, Apocalypse stumbles right out of the gate in my opinion. I feel like this could have been worked into the movie's events instead of the audio equivalent of an opening text crawl, and it would have been a lot more organic for it. But to be fair, that is how the second game started, so fair enough movie. You win this one. After this though, Apocalypse does things perfectly. Instead of jumping right into a mass zombie outbreak, we get to see what the old RC is like when it's not in the grips of world-ending disaster, followed by Umbrella workers enacting said disaster. Then we're treated to these cool shots of Umbrella employees getting evac'd in these awesome looking blacked out SUVs, and at this point I was pretty damn excited. I always thought it was a shame we never got to see much of Umbrella actually operating as a scummy biotech corporation before they went under. Instead, we only ever got to deal with the after effects of their actions. Scenes like this were awesome for me because it helped give a bit more personality to the soulless conglomerate. After this, we flash forward nearly a day and we get some killer news footage of the impending outbreak. And I gotta say, I have always loved this kind of stuff. I don't know, something about seeing a news broadcast with shaky footage of walking corpses attacking people, it just adds the right amount of scale to a zombie movie setup in my opinion. So as far as I go, this movie is starting off on the right foot in a very massive way. And continuing that momentum, we get a badass take-no-shit Jill Valentine popping zombie craniums in the RPD. Following in the game's story, Jill was disgraced after the Spencer Mansion incident, and now she's done with Raccoon City, which explains her devil-may-care attitude, but not exactly why she's able to go on a shooting spree inside the RPD without being filled with ridiculous amounts of lead.
I told you, she could have had.
But to be fair, the Raccoon City police force has never really proven themselves to be all that effective in the past. Then for some reason, we get a recap of the Alice waking up sequence from the first movie despite being told these events happened not even 10 minutes ago. From here, we get to see that Umbrella has quarantined the city and is only letting people out through one exit and only if they aren't infected. And it's really cool not only seeing Umbrella conducting business here, but also STARS members helping out. The nerd in me still gets really excited seeing that uniform in a big budget popcorn flick. And somehow the movie keeps kicking ass with this really cool scene of a woman being chased up a flight of stairs by zombies and a UBCS chopper deciding not to help. Then we get introduced to this movie's version of Carlos, and I'll be damned if this isn't one of the dumbest and coolest action scenes in recent memory. Capped off with Zed getting a face full of combat boot, which is always nice to see. Heading back to the Umbrella blockade, a few people start to turn, as we all knew they were going to, leading to the old red and white shutting the one and only exit out of the city and opening fire on the crowd. The scene after this is a cool little example of how bad things have gotten in the city, and despite a really odd decision to have this play out at a low, blurry frame rate, I loved every second of it. Followed up by what is essentially a live-action version of RE3's opening, and I mean that as the high compliment it sounds like, This scene was absolutely amazing to me. Then we're treated to one of the best scenes in the entire movie when one of Umbrella's scientists refuses to leave the city without his daughter and proceeds to gain access to his employer's communication network by accessing the web and doing a hack search. Truly the greatest hacker since 4chan. After all this, we finally pick up from Alice's ending in the first movie, with her doing a little B&E and suffering from something they did to her in the hospital. Meanwhile, Jill, one of her fellow STARS members, and a news anchor have made it out of the Umbrella firing line and take shelter in a nearby church. And now that our little crew has had a chance to catch up, we should probably address how absolutely perfect this actress fits the look of Jill. No joke, this was some killer casting. Even though they did have her smoking, and I don't know about you, but my Jill Valentine ain't no smoker. Well, bad habits aside, our motley crew ends up talking with the religious zealot who runs this joint, and since this guy doesn't seem like the trustworthy type, Jill proceeds to explore this early English-looking church, giving me some serious Resident Evil vibes. The atmosphere is spooky, the lighting is dark, the shots are great, and instead of throwing an army of the dead at us, we have one zombie that the priest has been feeding. Honestly, this movie has no business doing this good of a job at emulating the games this far into the runtime, but damn it do I appreciate it. After a little bit of a tussle, some of the survivors try to escape the church only to be met with a group of zombies, leading to the lick reveal, which again is handled very well. Sure, they messed up by having it be able to see, but even I can let that slide given the circumstances. Now, I say it's handled well, but that all ends right about here. Of course, I'm not gonna lie to you and say that this wasn't cool as hell, but damn do I wish they would have kept up the well-paced, slow-building scares the movie was nailing for the last few minutes. Plus, let's be honest, for this to have happened, Alice would have had to have been able to see what was happening inside the church from the road, and given the stained glass windows, that's doubtful. Either that, or she randomly ramped a motorcycle through a church, which I don't know which one of those sounds more dumb. After this, we're introduced to the comic relief that Anderson for some reason felt was necessary in a horror action flick. GTA, motherfucker! And right off the bat, I did not like this character. I mean, sure, Mike Epps can be funny as hell, but none of his material really lands in this movie if you ask me. On the plus side though, we do get more scenes of the UBCS and STARS fighting zombies, and once again, it's totally fucking awesome. As you'd expect from any tactical situation in Raccoon City, the good guys are soon overrun, and Carlos, Nikolai, and this guy retreat, leading to this awesome recreation of the last shot of the RE3 intro. Then Alice and the gang walk through a graveyard, and no movie saying how dumb an idea that is out loud does not make it any less ridiculous. This is when Alice finds out Peyton over here is infected, and you'd think having gone through the Spencer Mansion incident, Jill would be the first to give him a 9mm lobotomy, but she's also historically been a very loyal friend, so that kind of checks out. After this wraps up, the thing we all knew was going to happen happens, and zombies start rising from the grave, despite it being doubtful they'd be able to break through their coffins. Am I being too critical? I feel like I'm being too critical here. And in that spirit, I have to say the absolute garbage that was the first movie's fight choreography is much improved here. Alice actually looks like she knows how to throw a kick this time around, and she's in much better shape this movie, which shows in how easily she moves around compared to the first. Also, Peyton starts pistol whipping a zombie in the collarbone, which made me laugh way harder than I'm willing to admit right now. On top of that, there's this slow motion scene where Jill and Alice are straight up punching zombies in the face, and I know this is supposed to be played straight, but the sound effects sound like they came straight from a royalty-free Kung Fu SFX pack. Also, I can't be the only one who thinks this looks fucking ridiculous. After that, we join back up with Carlos and company, who are now totally cut off from the rest of their forces and are tracking down a chopper to evac the city, and we get this really cool scene where they explore this hospital and discover the weapons Umbrella dropped off for Nemesis. And speaking of which, we finally get to see the big guy in action, and it's not good. I mean, a lot of the practical effects actually work really well with the Nemesis suit, but his head is gigantic and totally out of proportion to the rest of his body. Honestly, I was stuck on this the entire movie. There's just no way they didn't see how dumb this looks while filming. There has to be some practical reason why they went with such a big-ass head. After this, our Umbrella scientist friend gets in touch with Alice and her group, offering them a chance to get out of the city if they rescue his daughter. But they gotta do it fast since Umbrella is planning to nuke the city come daylight. All standard stuff as far as RE fans go. On their way to find our little MacGuffin, they run afoul of old Nemi, and Peyton gets a few more holes than he had before, leading to Alice and Nemesis going toe-to-toe, where we find out our girl can apparently leap 11 feet in the air, which could be cool if it was pulled off by a stunt team who had any idea what they were doing, but don't worry, so can Nemesis, and I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my fucking life. During the fight, Alice dodges a point-blank explosion using the strongest material known to man, plastic, leading to a legitimately harrowing scene where Alice pops a dislocated finger back into place. And coming from someone who's done this to himself and others, I can say pulling the finger out of the joint just a bit before forcing it to bend would have been a much less painful way to go. Catching back up with the rest of the group, Jill's trying to hotwire a car when her old friend Peyton pays her a visit, and I think this guy did a great job as a zombie. He acted the part perfectly, and the emotion here with Jill having to put down a friend and fellow STARS member is genuinely well done. Jill, the reporter, and the comic relief LJ, who I am just now being able to admit has kind of grown on me at this point, finally get to the high school and find a crashed canine unit because, of course they did. Once the search for Miss Ashford starts, the team splits up, making me assume at this point the director is treating horror movie tropes more as a checklist than a running gag, and we get some old-fashioned slow-paced horror again. Honestly, the dissonance is insane between the really well-done atmospheric setups and the schlocky action with oversized head Nemesis. If I didn't know any better, I'd assume two separate directors took the helm at differing intervals, one who knew what he was doing and the other one, well, you know. Now that being said, these scenes aren't examples of a master at work or anything, but instead they're just really competently made, especially when juxtaposed to the parts of the movie that don't hold up as well. Then we find out that our scientist friend hedged his bets a little bit when our two groups finally meet for the first time, and we get something that you really don't see enough of in zombie movies: zombified kids. Now, I'm sure a well-adjusted person could come up with some ethical reason to not use children in this kind of stuff, but clearly that is not me. Eventually, Jill grabs Angela and heads for the cafeteria, but gets jumped by a Cerberus, which is still obviously just meat strung across a Doberman, leading to a pretty cool one-liner from Nikolai,
"Stay,"
accompanied by a model of a Cerberus clearly being thrown at him and actually cracking him in the face pretty good. I've replayed this in slow motion more than 10 times now, and it just keeps getting funnier every time I see it. See, now that is how you do a Cerberus. And yes, once again, this was very dumb, but just as awesome. And this may be off base a little bit, but I have to wonder what kind of obsession the team behind this movie had with smoking. It seems like there are a lot of scenes where characters who never really smoke seem to always have cigarettes on them, and I don't know why, but that just seemed really off-putting. It was kind of awkward. Alice, having saved Angela, is now essentially face-to-face with the AI that ran the hive, which is a cool little nod to the first movie, and we find out that both Alice and the girl are infected with the T-virus, but more importantly, she has the antivirus in her lunchbox, leading to this movie's origin story for the T-virus, which involved Dr. Ashford trying to cure his sick daughter and Umbrella stepping in and taking the project from him. An inaccurate little piece of information for sure if you're taking the games as canon in the movie universe, which you probably shouldn't be doing, but it does kind of fit in with our general idea of what Umbrella is and how they operate. So our team, now with Angela in tow, are headed towards the helicopter the doctor promised them, and in the process, Alice films the little exposition dump we got hit with at the start of the film. When the group actually gets to the evac area, you have to marvel at Umbrella's overspending by using this incredible staging point for a single helicopter ride, but hey, that's why we love them. In the process of infiltrating the place, Carlos gets to show off some sweet moves, and we get to witness easily one of the most ridiculous and poorly pulled off stunts in movie history, hands down. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you a woman running down a wall. I guess I'm talking a lot of shit here, but on the plus side, it's good seeing Ugandan action movie tier special effects getting some play here in the US. After that travesty, we get some fight scenes you could charitably describe as mediocre, but Apocalypse makes up for this with a flashback of Nemesis being worked on, giving us this killer visual. Sadly though, the cool stuff doesn't last, and we find out Alice and the gang have been set up from the start. It seems like this whole evac scenario has been orchestrated by the head Umbrella guy in order to get Nemesis and Alice in the same place so they can, and I can't stress enough how ridiculous this is, have a fist fight. And holy hell is this fucking bad. All of these shots show off so much detail in Nemesis, which would normally be a good thing, but typically when you have prosthetics this bad, the idea is to shoot around them. You know, obscure your shots with lighting and fast sweeps and zooms. They had to know how stupid this thing looked in motion. I absolutely refuse to believe a single person on set thought this deserved to be in the finished product. So here we are, watching Alice punch this behemoth in the face and having him respond with actual spin kicks. Honestly guys, we've hit the cringe lottery here. You only get movie making on this terrible of a level every once in a great while, so we have to cherish this while it lasts. And just when Alice has the upper hand, a concept that is fucking ridiculous given the circumstances, she can't go through with finishing him. She still remembers her time with him in the first movie, which is a lot more than I can say for myself. as I forgot this guy's name almost right after I finished writing the last movie's review. But even my jaded ass can admit that this was relatively emotional and it worked for the movie. Or at least it would have if we weren't left with this hilarious shot of Alice delivering this emotional monologue with Nemesis' dumb-looking face in the background, which is this movie's cue to have Tall, Dark, and Ugly turn against his master so that Alice can escape. There's a pretty cool-looking shootout here and a funny enough one-liner.
Why haven't you been taking off? Because I usually drive a Cadillac.
Then Apocalypse rips off Code Veronica's intro and Nemesis sacrifices himself while an army of the dead rush the building, setting up the antagonist getting his comeuppance. Then the aforementioned nuke detonates over the city, causing the gang's new helicopter to crash, and we're left to believe Alice died in the accident. In the following scenes, we get these scattered news broadcasts showing that Umbrella didn't exactly come out of this one as clean as they first thought, and we find Alice in some kind of tank with hoses hooked up to a respirator despite there clearly being holes cut in them, followed by some fairly gratuitous nudity and Alice remembering everything that brought her to this point.
My name is Alice. And I remember everything.
Oh, and apparently she's a psychic now. So there's that. Well, anyways, Carlos, Jill, and LJ show up to Shanghai her, despite one of them being well known as a member of STARS, with working knowledge of their illicit activities, and the other being an ex-employee that you'd figure someone would have recognized. And that's it. We close on a pretty crappy ending to a pretty okay movie, all things considered. But on the plus side, there's some kill switch engage playing over the credits, which definitely helps out. So all in all, I will say Apocalypse was much better and worse than I remembered all at once. I genuinely forgot how well a lot of the movie handled its horror and action. There are parts of the movie that honestly had me really engaged and right there on the verge of being spooked out. The over-the-top action was actually really fun, not counting the last 40 minutes or so, and yeah, maybe it's absolute cheese bordering on overdose levels of schlock, but it kind of works. There were moments of subtle atmospheric dread followed up by spinning back kicks to zombies' faces, and that's a combination I can get behind. No one will be nominating this flick for any good writing awards, and if you spend more than a microsecond thinking about any of the included scenarios, you're likely to die of frustration, but it's a surprisingly good popcorn flick if you just turn off the logic centers of your brain and let it lull you into a drooling comatose state. Is it accurate to the games? Oh god no, but to be fair, neither was the first one, so at least it consistently shits on canon. But to be honest, the more you expect from this film, the worse of a time you'll have. So maybe I was wrong about Apocalypse. I remembered it as being a non-stop shitfest, but I'm happy to say that's not the case. Or at least it's not entirely. So yeah, rest assured this movie is a safe bet for a good time when you and the crew get together and need some unintentional humor on a Saturday night mixed with some surprisingly good scares. And with that, we have moved out of my field of experience. The rest of the movies in the series will be brand new to me, and after this, maybe I'm not dreading that concept as much as before. But until I dive into those, I hope to see all of you again right here on the Resident Evil Retrospective. Yo, what's up guys? Thanks for sitting through another attempt at me figuring out how to do a movie review. Here's hoping this one didn't get beat to hell with copyright claims. If you like my special brand of bad film critique, I'll have a playlist linked on screen for you. And maybe think about supporting me on Patreon if you like what you saw here today. Well, I have plenty of work to do, so I'll see all of you guys later. Peace out.